What's up, everybody? Welcome back. Tastes Like Music. Jason and Joe here. This is a surprise listography for most of you. The people in the Discord had about a week or two notice and knew this was coming. But I think anyone that knows the channel should have maybe predicted that we might do this. It's also a remastered listography, meaning I covered this band way back when. So there is an existing list that I did before. This is the first time Joe is ranking the albums, and of course we're talking about The Cure, and we are doing this because they just dropped their first new record in 16 years. They've been teasing this record for like at least 2 or 3 years, so we've kind of just been waiting for it to drop to be able to redo this, but it is here now, and yeah, so I obviously am familiar with all of The Cure's records. My list did change a little, mostly at the bottom. The order changed. All my favorites are still my favorites, but yeah, kind of thinking about the weaker ones a little differently.
I knew most of these just from I don't know album of the year and uh back in the day. I remember hearing like the new ones around the 2000s with Bloodflowers and self-titled. I don't know if I ever got to 413 Dream, but listened to the Top for 1984 and Pornography for 1982 and Head on the Door was on my album of the year list in 85. So most of these were, you know, familiar with, but um we'll talk about more. I had a lot of trouble ranking these. I had no idea what I was doing.
Hey guys, I want to take a quick break from the video to let you know about our new partner. If you're a musician, if you're in a band, if you're the head of a label, you're going to want to pay attention to this. We are teaming with Hellbender Vinyl. Hellbender is a vinyl pressing plant right here in Pittsburgh, where Joe and I are from. If you know anything about the state of the record industry right now, you probably know that pressing plants are completely overwhelmed, way backed up. Wait times for most of the other pressing plants are 6 months to a year. Not at Hellbender, though. I mean, you're going to get the same quality, the same service as you would anywhere else, probably even better, but you're not going to wait that long. Wait times right now at Hellbender are in the 2 to 3 month range, which is really fast. They're not totally bogged down pressing Taylor Swift and Adele records. It's a full service, one-stop shop. You can have your record mastered by them. You can have it pressed by them. They can do anything you can think of in terms of splatters, different colored vinyl, different weights, different kinds of jackets. They can do gatefolds, die cuts, printed inner sleeves, inserts, stickers, you name it. And not only that, while your record is in production, you'll be assigned a project manager that will stay in touch with you weekly, letting you know where exactly your project is at. So you won't be turning it in and waiting for months and months, thinking that they maybe even forgot about your record and not knowing what's going on. They'll take you through it every step of the way. If you're in town, you can hit them up. You can get a tour of the facility. Everyone there, a musician themselves, they understand the process and how much your records mean to you. So they take great care to make sure you get the product you're looking for. Great people over there, hell-bent on quality, hell-bent on service. Hellbender Vinyl, check them out. And if you place an order with them, be sure to let them know that Tastes Like Music sent you. All right, so now we've got 14 records to rank, I believe. And the bottom for me is 17 Seconds. This is the second record by the band. The first one's really like kind of post-punky, a lot of like angular guitar stuff. This one also post-punky, but the gothic stuff starts to creep in. It's much moodier, and yeah, this is just not the sound for me. I know some of these early Cure records are very beloved among diehard Cure fans. I just don't care for any of them that much. You got Simon Gallup replacing Dempsey on this record. They add a keyboardist, Matthew Hartley. But yeah, it's just kind of dark and moody, and the melodies are barely there. The production's maybe a little better on this record than on the first one. Robert Smith's guitar tone is pretty unique and kind of like unifies the songs and makes everything sound cohesive. I think the keys, adding those gives a little bit more depth of sound as opposed to the first record. And I kind of appreciate that they're kind of, polishing their sound and refining their identity a bit on this record. I just don't like the songs very much. That's basically that. A Forest is probably the highlight, but I know there's people that like absolutely go bananas for that song. And is, as far as like the Cure's hits, it's probably like one of my least favorite. So I've got it at 2.5 stars.
That's a little surprising to me. The bottom for me is just painfully obvious, and that is the debut, Three Imaginary Boys. It's just I don't like post-punk, and listening to The Cure play post-punk just does not do it for me. Like you said, it's got those like angular guitars, and it's kind of dry and boring melodies. It's simplistic, primitive bass and drums, and kind of a kick in the balls because the band had already released Boys Don't Cry and Killing an Arab, which are both fantastic songs. So the fact that they would then, do this to us with this crummy post-punk album and Jumping Somebody Else's Train, all of those songs are 100 times better than any song on this album. It's just like a hodgepodge of moldy, uninteresting post-punk, and I really don't have anything positive to say about it other than they quickly changed their sound and never sounded anything like this again. And I think that it's pretty great. Post-punk bands always start off terrible though. Susie and the Banshees and Joy Division, like those first albums, just terrible. So they got over it pretty quick, and they would get better, much better.
Next one for me is we're going to kind of wipe through all the early stuff. It's Faith. They get rid of Hartley on this record, so they're back to a three-piece. It's really not that different from 17 Seconds, but there are some moments like on Primary where they pick up the pace a little, the tempo's a little up, so it's not all completely like a dirge. I think the bass lines are a bit more interesting and propel the songs a little bit more. The songs have a little bit more movement to them. But I don't really like how the vocals are mixed on this record. Very distant sounding. And yeah, it's like taking the band's greatest asset and just burying it. The voice of Robert Smith is why I'm here. So yeah, this one is a light 3 stars for me.
Forgot to say my score for Three Imaginary Boys. It's 2 stars. 2 stars for that one. I'll go up to 2.5, grudgingly, for an album much later. I'm not going early stuff, all early stuff at the bottom here. I'm going 2004 for The Cure, self-titled, the one that they bring in Ross Robinson, famed nu metal producer, for. And to me, this is just like really flat sounding. Like it wants to be modern. It's got like a more metallic back end, a little more angst, I think, in Smith's vocals and lyrics, a little like harder sounds. Recorded live in studio. And to me, this is like one of those classic band doesn't really know what to do, so we're going to update our sound with a modern producer, go in a new direction, but mostly, floundering, uninteresting songs. Really didn't hear any like good melodies or, there's no good lyrics. There's no fun lyrics, no turns of phrases, like nothing that you'd expect from Robert Smith. Um, that's about it. Us and Them is one of my least favorite songs in the whole dang catalog. And yeah, I guess props for trying something new, but it did not work. So fortunately, they would not get Ross Robinson for any more of their albums.
Going to shift gears a little bit and go forward in time to Bloodflowers from 2000 for my next one. There were no singles from this record. They said they had some more commercial sounding demos, but they opted to, leave those off the record and kind of get a really cohesive set of songs, something moodier and darker, something the Cure are certainly no strangers to, but I don't know, there's something about this one that doesn't quite sit right with me. I believe it was my least favorite on my original Cure video. It could just use like a little lightness to serve as relief to all of these like dark moody tunes. Some of the songs are okay, but they're all so similar. If they had like different surroundings, they might stand out more. But it's just there's always a balance to be struck between cohesion and like still having enough variety to keep the listener interested. And I think this is just too much of the same thing over and over again. It's got a really dense low end as well. The bass probably a bit too loud on it. I hate the drum programming on the loudest sound. They do mostly avoid that terrible like 2000s bad production that we talk about a lot. But that is one pretty egregious example of it. The Last Day of Summer is probably my favorite track, but I think that even that is B tier Cure at best. So yeah, this is a 3-star one as well.
Yeah, it's also my number 12, also 3 stars, and pretty much the same thoughts as you. To me, this sounds like it sounds like they're behind the times. Like they basically invented a lot of the sound, and I feel like sort of like the new metal, like post-grunge, some of those like darker gothic bands like like Stabbing Westward, and even like Nine Inch Nails a little bit, sort of co-opted their aesthetic a little bit. And this kind of sounds like them. I don't know. It sounds like they are now taking it from them after they took it from The Cure. And it's just, it needs something new. I think, after Wild Mood Swings, they were like, okay, let's go back to The Cure. What makes The Cure The Cure? And it ended up sounding a little dated, a little flat here. Um, all the songs are super long except one. Like the second track on the album is 11 minutes and 13 seconds long, and that's really pushing it for me. Everything's like 5, 6, 7 minutes, and yeah, it doesn't sound bad for the 2000s, but it definitely sounds like the 2000s. And yeah, it's them, recycling the sounds that they invented to diminishing returns. So. Yeah, not much to say about this one. I didn't dislike it, but rarely was I like, oh, what's going on here? It's just kind of like going through the motions and uninteresting, pure light for the most part.
Well, I've got The Cure self-titled from 2004 next. Yeah, Ross Robinson, previously known for working with Korn, Limp Bizkit, Slipknot, Glassjaw at the Drive-In, to which I said, uh-oh. This, I don't know. It's almost a good Cure album. I think there's like some interesting tunes here. But yeah, kind of like Bloodflowers, there's just something slightly off about it. There's like an anger and aggression to it, where like you said about Bloodflowers, it feels like they are looking to the bands they influenced and taking some of that into their own sound, and it doesn't feel natural, really. I think so much of what makes Robert Smith great is that melancholy mixed with like yearning and also like whimsy, this like whimsical side to it as well. And the anger and the aggression coming in on this record just does not sit right. It doesn't feel like Robert Smith. Before Three is, I think, a great example of what I'm talking about. It's got this really nice melody. It sounds like classic Cure. There's like this yearning in the lyrics, but the vocal delivery feels kind of angry, and it just doesn't hit the way it should. I also think the mix is a little bit muddled and muffled sounding. But yeah, there are some decent songs. End of the World and Taking Off, I think, have good tunes to them. So yeah, it mostly comes down to the production a little bit, and also just the vocal delivery and the kind of overall vibe, which probably comes down to production as well, in whatever direction Ross Robinson was pushing them in. So 3 stars.
All right, my number 11. I go to the last one before this last one. 413 Dream. Um, I think it's better than The Cure. It's better than Bloodflowers, obviously. But only slightly. Um, I think it's more melodic. It has a little brighter notes to it. Um, And I don't know, I didn't really write much about this one because it just kind of floated by again. He's come back. I guess it wasn't a comeback. There's sort of so many years in between each album that it feels like each one of these is a comeback and a different era of the band. But I don't know, this one I thought it sounded like a little emo, a little like of its times of 2008, sort of like that indie rock revolution. Maybe them taking a little bit from that, but I don't know. I just didn't get much of anything from this album at all. I'm not gonna continue talking about it. So 3 stars for 14th Dream.
That is a record that I like a lot, and we'll be talking about much later. Big Defender, I'm the only person in the world that feels that strongly about that record, but my next one is Three Imaginary Boys. Get back to some of the early stuff. You got Robert Smith, Michael Dempsey, and Lowell Tolhurst on this one. And yeah, it's a post-punk record. Neither of us are the biggest fans of that genre. But I think even at this early stage, I think there's something about Robert Smith's vocal delivery that makes them a bit more compelling than just about anyone else in the genre. I think the production is pretty flat and pretty uninteresting. You have stuff like Foxy Lady that the band didn't want on the record. But you do also have a few quality tunes. You got the dancey grinding halts. I think Another Day is kind of sweetly melodic. Meat Hook hints at future musical explorations. It's a little bit like a precursor to Love Cats in a way. So yeah, I think there's some okay stuff on it. I think kind of the angular guitar work and stuff makes it more interesting to me than the subsequent few records. It reminds me a little of like XTC and stuff. So it's not too bad. 3 stars for me.
All right, it's number 10 in the top 10 already. I'm going 17 seconds. I have it 3.5 stars. I think it's miles ahead of the debut. Sounds like The Cure. It's got that, gothic swirl to it. This is the first with Simon Gallup. They bring in Matthew Hartley as the keyboardist, who they only had on one record. I don't think Robert Smith liked him because he wanted to play chords and not single notes. Robert Smith, big single note synth guy. Note that for the notes. But I think this one, it's got that gothic haunting feel, thanks to largely Matthew Hartley's synth work and keys. I think Robert Smith's guitar work's a lot more interesting. None of that wannabe post-punk overtones. I think there's some nice evocative soundscapes on here. It's kind of like the cover. It's kind of like that misty pine forest, dark, wintry, cold, quiet, gloomy vibe to it. I think In Your House is a standout along with a forest, of course. Some nice minor key arpeggiated guitar. You got those dour vocals, like the way it dissipates into nothingness at the end. At Night has a nice hypnotic repetition to it. And I like that big booming fuzz bass they throw in there. And I think they just, this is their sound. Like this is what they established as, hey, we're going to make this our sound. Is a unique, I think, sound to them in the pop music landscape. It's good, but it still, I think, has too much vibe and not enough song, which kind of would be a recurring theme throughout their first couple of records. Shows that they have a distinct, unique sound and vision, but not quite there with the songwriting. Even though they could write pop songs, I mean, they had pop songs. They just choose not to integrate that into their albums on these early ones for whatever reason. Dumb, but whatever. The vibe. It's all about the vibe.
All right, next up for me is Wild Mood Swings. So you can see which 2 eras of the band are my least favorite, ping-ponging between early and like late 90s, early 2000s. This is the first record that they did without David Allen since Japanese Whispers, which was kind of a compilation thing that some people count as a record. We're not including it in our ranking. A couple major differences compared to other Cure records on this one. This was their first time using computers a lot. They used Cubase to record the record, and they also used live strings and brass as opposed to synths. And that does kind of bring a different flavor to the record. Jason Cooper is the credited drummer, and he did join the band, although reading about the record, it sounds like many drummers were used. I read something where Robert Smith said he was like, didn't know which drummers were on which tracks or something. And so I think they were working through a bunch of different people. He also said he was going after kind of like a Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me concept where every song sounded like a different band. And I think there's sort of a similar problem with this record that Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me has, where it sounds a little scattered and all over the place. And the opposite problem of Bloodflowers, which feels too uniform. I think this record maybe doesn't have enough of an identity. There are some good songs on here. I like the mariachi-esque 13th. It recalls earlier tunes of theirs like Catch. Mint Car feels like a stab at Friday I'm in Love Part 2, but it's pretty decent. So they had some change up in personnel, but I don't think it shook things up too much. They're still The Cure, but with production that doesn't always work. It feels like a little bit of a forced attempt to stay modern. And it just sounds like the most 90s. The production is so 90s. 1 second they're kind of trying to sound like Nine Inch Nails. The next second it almost sounds like Sheryl Crow. If you took only the good stuff and made it a bit shorter, it might be close to 3.5 stars, but it's still a 3-star record for me.
Well, it is also my number 9, and I like it. I think it's pretty good. I understand that Cure fans probably don't love this one. And yeah, you just talked about the records. I don't have to talk about the lineup changes or anything like that. So I will just say, this is Cure in the heyday of alternative rock. And I had not heard this one before. So I was thinking, okay, are they the influencee instead of the influencer now? And I think the answer is kind of yeah. They are, I think, taking more from the bands and everything around them. I guess, Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me is sort of a good template for it because it is all over the place. It really is a wild mood swing. They bounce around a lot. But, Perry Bamonte's guitar, I like what he's doing a little bit on the intro. It's got that, classic. Here's 2 minutes of intro before I start singing from Robert Smith. But that is kind of a throwback maybe to Disintegration, or Wish, but they really do a good job, I think, of bouncing around. Club America, kind of exaggerated vocals. I didn't love that one. Some nice guitar sounds though. But I hear like shades of alternative and Britpop and some of the shoegaze that they had already brought in on Wish. Not much like Cure Gothic from their past. It's a lot of new sounds, but I really like Gone. I think it's a great track. I like some of the string instruments on Numb, some horns on Gone. You got the salsa stuff going on the 13th. Little flirty lyrics, not quite horny Robert Smith, maybe flirty Robert Smith there. Strange Attraction kind of has like a Prince R&B sound to it, to the groove, which is cool. Mint Car, they do kind of the poppy, peppy stuff. It just doesn't feel quite as natural as it used to. And there's some moodier stuff, but nothing like super gothic. I think with a trim of maybe 15, 20 minutes, I could get to 4 stars on it actually, but I'm at the 3.5 mark for this. I think there's plenty of good stuff. It's worth a listen. But it's a mid 90s album, so it's way too long and there's just too much kitchen sink. Just here's one of everything on it. And it doesn't have the pop songwriting of, Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me. So good, but not great.
All right. Well, have we done enough to make all the hardcore Cure fans turn off the video yet? I hope so that they don't have to hear me talk about Pornography, which is next on my list. I know for a lot of people this is like the ultimate Cure album, and Obviously, for me, it is not. Just the overall vibes, the sound, and the style of this record, just not what I gravitate towards. I do, however, feel like this is a decent bit better than what came before it. I also acknowledge that it is an important record in their development, if for no other reason than Robert Smith's kind of emergence as a true frontman. 100 Years, not my favorite track, but hard to deny the vocal performance on that and the feeling that he's putting into it, something that I don't think we really got to see on any of the previous records. It was a tough time for the band, a lot of drug use and infighting and depression, and they were on the brink of breaking up. They almost did break up. So I think all of that going on does sort of give the record a little bit more of an urgency to it, a little more vitality on display here. Yeah, I think there's an energy to this that is lacking on 17 Seconds and Faith. I also think A Strange Day points the way a bit to a poppier future for the band. Just overall, not something I'm really ever going to listen to. So still at 3 for it.
Man, I did not expect to be the pure defender, but it looks like that's may happen at least until we get to the top of the top stuff. Again, we're in sync with our choices, although I like Pornography more than you do. I used to not like Pornography at all when we listened to it in for the 1982 deep dive. I had it like a low 3 stars. I just didn't do anything for me. But this time, and I listened to these albums, these early ones, a whole bunch because I could not figure out where to place them. They were just, I had one point I had 17 seconds at like number 3 on my list, and it's just bouncing all around. Now I think I appreciate it more. I think it starts off great with 100 Years. The vibe of it all kind of got to me eventually after a couple listens. Those spooky synths, those muffled drums, like it's got a real mood to it. And I think I was turned off a little bit before by the lyrics because they're just way too sad boy. You know, first lyrics on the album, it doesn't matter if we all die. Like, come on. Like I like the peppier, poppier Robert Smith, and he had already showed that he could write a great pop song. So, you know, he's still giving us these like dour, sour, gloomy albums, but it's grown on me. All of the repetition, all of the bleakness, you know, it's there, but it's not like a really slow, glacially paced album. Like there's some activity. There's no, you know, variety. There's no rays of sunshine, but the drum machines are pretty cool. Um, the vibes are interesting and they're really layered well and sort of just like it wears you down eventually. Robert Smith is wallowing in his own crapulence here. Between 100 Years and Cold, those two tunes especially kind of like got me into the spirit of the whole thing. And, you know, I don't think it's as good as the fan base thinks it is, but, you know, I think it's pretty good, but it is pretty uneven, and I just can't like quite give myself fully to the album, fully to Pornography. I need some moments of brightness. I need those later albums where it's much more balanced between like the pop songwriting and the vibey, moody, gothic stuff. And this just feels like too much of that darkness. And I don't know, I don't really know why people love it so much, other than I guess it's like a really sad boy kind of, you know, woe is me, darkness kind of album. Because it has good moments, but there's just not there's not a masterpiece here. It's a good album. It's not a masterpiece. It's 3.5 stars.
All right, next for me, this is where I step up to 3.5 stars. Records that I think are good. And I'm a big Cure fan, actually. I know it doesn't seem like it so far in the video, but the records of theirs that I like, I really, really like. Next up for me is The Top, which is a very divisive record. Lowell Tolhurst moves to keys. They bring in Andy Anderson to play the drums. I believe this is the only record that he plays on. I like his drum work a lot on this record, actually. Robert Smith had been working in 1983 on like a side project called The Glove, and he was doing that almost simultaneously with the Susie and the Banshees record Hyena, and this comes right after that, so a very busy time for Robert Smith. This is a kind of an interesting transitional record. It's not really fully arriving at their moody romantic pop, but it's also no longer blanketed in darkness. And I think in a way, it's almost like the most straightforward rock sounding record that they ever did. It tends to be a little forgotten in their catalog. There's a lot of ideas on it. There's like classical guitar on Birdman Girl and flute on Dressing Up. And you have Middle Eastern influences throughout the record. The production has so much more clarity than the earlier records. I love hearing Robert Smith's vocals a lot louder and more up front. And Andy's drumming, I think, is a huge upgrade, really forceful and assertive and driving. I think Robert Smith hasn't fully figured out how to distill all of the elements into like a unified vision yet, but there's a lot of different things to enjoy on this record. Solid 3.5 stars, not a great, amazing record, but I think for me, easily better than everything before it, and also a bit worse than the next stretch of classic records before you get into the 90s. So yeah, solid.
All right, my number 7, I'm going with Faith, which is an album that I had not heard before, but really jumped up like the 5th time I listened to it. I couldn't really quite figure out where to place Faith, Pornography, and 17 Seconds, but in the end here, Faith is getting the nod, is my favorite of those early ones. I think it's like 17 Seconds in a lot of ways. It's got that moody, spooky vibe. But I think the songwriting is more interesting. I think there's a better balance between the goth, the post rock almost, post punk, synth pop. I don't think the melodies are quite as good as they were going to be once you get to the top, but I think it's a little catchier, a little more memorable than Pornography or 17 Seconds. Really like All Cats Are Gray, really pretty synth line underneath the big reverbed out drums. Funeral Party has a cool hum to it. I like the bass line a lot on Doubt. Drowning Man, cool haunting vibes. Title tracks, pretty cool sounding, big, long. And the album just has, kind of like the other ones, but it's got like this big foggy, fractured fairy tale vibe to it. I think it's, cinematic, a little more atmospheric. Melodies are smudged a little bit, but they're definitely still there. And I just like the bigness, the fullness of it all. And I just think it's slight. It's not like a huge step up over Pornography, but I just think it's got a little more interesting nuance to it, and not quite as bleak and dark as Pornography. So still at 3.5 stars, but a high 3.5 stars for Faith.
All right, next for me, this is where I've got the new one, Songs of a Lost World. Corkett is back, the producer from Bloodflowers. The first record with Reeves Gabrel on guitar, formerly of Bowie's band. It was in Tin Machine. He's been in The Cure for 12 years. This is his first studio record. I think this is significantly better than the last Corkett produced record. I think, much better than Bloodflowers, but I do also think it has some similar problems. Like, even though I'd say it's well produced and it's a good sounding record, I think it's a touch overly weighty and dark, and with production that's a little overly homogenized. I will say, think there are better songs here. I think the overall tone is a little bit more Cure-like and doesn't feel like it's borrowing from modern bands so much, but it feels like a pretty concerted effort was put into trying to sound like Disintegration. It's really trying to get back to the classic Cure sound in a big way, but I think with some key missing elements, like that whimsy that I was talking about before is not really anywhere to be found on this record. Yeah, there's not a lot of lightness, not a lot of really romantic sentiments. It just, the whole thing feels kind of heavy. And track by track, I feel like when I'm listening to a song, I think this is pretty good. But I gave this record quite a few listens, and I still can't tell you what any of the songs by title really sound like. The melodies aren't super memorable. It's just a little bit forgettable, I think. So I think it'll go a long way to satisfying Cure fans because Robert Smith sounds fantastic. His voice is in great shape. He still sounds like he did back in the 80s. I think the overall sound of the record is like well sculpted and it harkens back to what people have been longing to hear. So I think people are going to really like this record. I think it'll be a welcome return. But for me, is it worth a 16-year wait for this? Not really. Yeah, a little disappointing from my perspective. Still 3.5 stars, still good, and great to hear them still sounding like themselves at this stage and after such a long time away. But yeah, I just could have used a few more songs that stuck in the head a little bit more.
My number six, I'm going the top. I think this is a wildly underrated record. I'm moving it up to 4 stars even from 1984 Deep Dive, which I had it a very high 3.5. Couldn't quite get to 4, but I was struck because people were warning me because I had not heard it before in the 1984 Deep Dive. There's a Cure record, but it's the top. But I was like, who cares? But I was taken aback when I heard it because I thought it was pretty interesting sounding, pretty unique for their catalog. Not that I had heard everything, but I'd pretty much heard at least something from all the eras. So I didn't realize that this was in their discography, in their repertoire. Like Jason said, some personnel moves. Lowell Tolhurst to keys. Andy Anderson comes in. And I love his drumming as well. It's just fantastically chaotic, loud, and powerful. And I think this album, one, it's louder, it's more rock, forward, I guess, better produced, more separation on the instruments. It's less about the atmosphere and more about the songs themselves, which I think is a good development. And this kind of has that same kind of variety, I guess. It's, more of what I expect from them in the 80s with Head on the Door and Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me, kind of bouncing around, trying different things. Some really cool songs. I think Shake Dog Shake is really neat. I love that rubbery bass sound. I think this is where Robert Smith really gets like that command to his voice. He's got that more unhinged sound, the moaning and the yelling and the all over the place. So he had kind of done on the singles, but I think this is really where he puts it on in the albums. Um, More of what he did on something like Love Cats. He uses that more here, and I think that's to the benefit of the album. I think the guitar is more interesting here. Got some jangle to it. Really like Birdman Girl. Wailing Wall, maybe the weakest track. It's got that like Middle Eastern appropriation, Snake Charmer type music to it, but it's not bad. I like the psychotic Give Me It, very frenetic, just those on the edge vocals, great unceasing drums, the squealing guitars. You get a little flute on here. You get like this magical kind of twinkly vibe on Dressing Up. You get something like the Caterpillar, which is very like lighthearted. Not something you usually see on Cure albums up to this point. Banana Fishbones, love the energy. It's just totally mad. And yeah, I mean, this is kind of like the album I was waiting for in the Cure discography that took some of the stuff that they were doing on the singles and fused it with, their gothic dour nature. And instead of just being like all moody vibes, like there's some fun and bounce. It's not just all dark and edgy. And that broadened sonic palette, I think works totally. I have no idea why people would be so down on this album. It's got like this ridiculously low RYM score. And I don't get it because I think it's great. 4 stars, a nice step forward for the band. And they would take this and run with it and get even better.
All right, I'm stepping up to 4 stars now as well for my number five, Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me. Even though I'm at 4 stars, it is a pretty wildly inconsistent record, I think. It was their first US Top 40 album. It's a true double album. There's a lot going on. Some absolutely amazing tunes here, like Catch and Just Like Heaven and Why Can't I Be You. I think pretty much any record with those three songs, I mean, that pretty much cements 4 stars right there, but not everything is up to that level. The Snake Pit to me is basically 7 minutes of filler. Really boring track. If Only Tonight We Could Sleep doesn't have a lot going on for me. That said, there are some less talked about gems on this record, like One More Time, The Perfect Girl, 1,000 Hours. I don't know. It's like the discussion always with a double album is like, would it have been better as a single album? Uh, yes, in this case, yes. I don't know if there's like a single album here that would stack up to the Head on the Door. Um, there are some pretty tedious stretches on this for me, but the good stuff is so good and just undeniable. And yeah, I think they just bit off a little more than they could chew with this one, but just some of the best 80s pop and rock, alternative, whatever you want to call it, stuff. Yeah, it's great. So 4 stars, not a perfect record by any means, but hard to ignore with some of the songs on there.
My number five will be the new one, Songs of a Lost World. I think it's a pretty impressive comeback. Reminds me a little bit of like the Depeche Mode record from last year, where it sounds like so good, it's almost like I don't know, it's like is there studio chicanery going on here? Like Robert Smith sounds absolutely incredible. Um, there probably isn't, but it's pretty amazing that he sounds so good after all these years. And, it's giving the people what they want, I think. This isn't Bloodflowers or 413 Dream or anything like that. Like, this is the sound of The Cure as, the fan base wants to hear it. It's dark and moody, and you get the big 2, 3 minute intros, no words, just vibing out for a couple minutes before Robert Smith comes in with something, huge or dramatic sounding. Music is very good. You got the stormy seas of jagged big guitars and immersive synths and those big, just pounding drums, just absolutely as hard as you can the whole dang time. You said that you wouldn't know any of the songs from their name. And I think that, is the one knock on the album. I think all the songs are pretty catchy when you're listening to them, but it's very hard to differentiate them at all after the album's over. It's got the Sturm in Drang, but it's not just noise for noise's sake. And there's good melodies in there, but I don't, there's no like really memorable lyrics or anything like that. So it does harken back a little bit to Disintegration and something like Pornography, even where it's like this is, a big, massive vibe to it. Um, but I'm also missing those little pop gems and those catchy little melodies and the things that to me make The Cure what they are. But it's good. There's some, I don't know, Mellotron or something, fake Mellotron in it alone that sounds great. I like the guitar tones. I like the synth tones. Nothing is forever. A little more hopeful than, the typical Cure Disintegration Pornography tune. So that one stuck out a little bit. And I do think End Song is pretty badass, got a massive back end, some great searching guitar leads. It's got a kind of a down mood to it, but it's not like woe is me. It's just like too big and powerful for that. So I think it ends on a great note, but all in all, I think it could use a little more brightness. It could use a little more cleverness in the lyrics, something like that. But I do think it's a pretty great comeback for 16 years or however long it's been. So I'm going 4 stars. It could show up in my top 25 of this year.
Will not be in my top 25, I don't think. Currently sitting at 101, so just outside of my top 100. That could shift. But okay, next up for me, number four, 413 Dream. This is a record you usually see at the bottom of lists, within the bottom three almost every time you see a Cure list. And I wholeheartedly disagree. People are not giving this record a chance. I don't know where that kind of placement is coming from. My only complaint about this record is the drum sounds, which are a little bit boxy. But aside from that, I think the songs are tremendous, and I think they really recapture their like expansive 80s dreaminess on this record. Underneath the Stars, I think is one of, if not the best opener in their entire catalog. I think it's a great album opener. The only one I think goes toe to toe with any of their best like jangly pop songs. Even if it is admittedly a bit of a rewrite of Just Like Heaven, I think it's a really good rewrite of Just Like Heaven. Really catchy, really fun. The Reason Why is great. Freak Show is a type of song that they haven't really done since the mid 80s. Real Snow White is excellent. Hungry Ghost, Perfect Boy, This Here and Now With You, just great tracks up and down the track list. And it captures the feel of their best records without being a forced carbon copy of them. And it also does what I think nothing since Wish really does as well, which is that blending of sadness and melancholy with like this romantic yearning and like a whimsical playfulness. That is what I love the most about the Cure stuff that I love. That is what really makes me love the Cure and be drawn to their music. When that's absent, I'm less interested. So I think this record, as far as like late period Cure, Wild Mood Swings and all, this gets that formula the closest to what I want it to be. I think it's really good. It's really tuneful. The melodies are strong, and I think the band is great on it. So I'm at 4. It's right on the cusp of 4.5, but it's a very high 4 stars.
Wow. Was that the same as it was in your
Yeah, it was number
earlier?
4. Yep.
Must have missed that craziness when I browsed through there. Number four is Wish. I think it's a really good album, 1992. They don't go for Disintegration Part 2, which I think is smart. They bring in some shoegaze sounds. They bring in some like alternative, more less of the classic Cure, less of the gothicness. Kind of, update their sound a little bit. I think enough to, be relevant and be interesting and be a dynamic force in the 90s. You get some really great stuff like Friday I'm in Love, which is just one of their perfect pop songs. You get A Letter to Elise, which really channels, I think, shoegaze, I think, really well. Some new sounds like the wah wah guitar in Cut. It's almost alternative rock with arena aspirations to it. It's bigger and louder. Still some just hammering drums. The textured ringing guitars, big booming bottom end. It's just them, I think, just updating it for 1992, updating the sound, still retaining their classic DNA, but just doing a really good job of adapting to the current sounds. And yeah, I think it works really well. It's a high 4-star album for me, Wish.
Number 3 for me is Disintegration, 4.5 stars. Last Dance and Homesick, not on the original LP pressings, so keep that in mind. It has been on all subsequent pressings, and it's on streaming services now as part of the record. Just really lush, sprawling, but also unified as well. It feels like the essence of the Cure distilled. It's like the vision of Robert Smith executed to perfection. I like some of the variety of my number 1 record and the records I have ahead of it. There's some tracks like individually on those records that I just love so much that propel those records ahead of Disintegration. But it is a case where I might say like this is the better place to start with the Cure. Like if you've never heard the Cure before, Disintegration is going to give you the best idea of what they're all about. It's dark and moody, so it kind of leads you into the early records, but it's super melodic, which kind of takes you through the rest of the 80s. And yeah, it's just every bit of what they do done as about as good as they ever did it. Yeah, great songs, top to bottom. The band stretching out. You get a lot of those really long intros, which I haven't talked about yet in this video. It's a very unique thing that they do. They like to like play the entire song without lyrics before he starts singing, and they're the only band that could pull that off. I think it works for them most of the time, and I don't think any other band could really get away with it. But it really works. I love it. It's great. 4.5 stars, just like the other two a little more.
All right, I'm still 4 stars for number three, which is Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me. You just mentioned their penchant for long, dramatic intros. I don't know if they really pull it off. They do it way too much, and it's probably the thing that irks me the most about the band. And there was a point that it really bothered me during the deep dive. And then I kind of got over it a little bit, so maybe it doesn't bother me as much. But at one point, I was like, every song is exactly the same. Like, it was just driving me crazy. And it really kind of starts on Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me. Like, there's just way too many of these things that it's like 2 to 3 minutes where it's just wordless. It's the song without words, and then he comes in and just does the same thing but with words. And it's like every one of these songs could be cut in half and absolutely nothing would change and they would all be better. And you could make Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me a single album and it would be better for it. Because this is one of those albums that didn't need to be a double album. It's not the White Album. It's not, a bunch of genre explorations that needed to be on tape. There's just too much. The whole side D cut it from the universe and no one would ever care. But of course, there are also some great songs. Otherwise, it wouldn't be my number three. Um, Catch, cool Bowie number. Torture sounds like Duran Duran, but with like more gothic overtones. Um, Great bass line from Simon Gallup. Really like the synths on that one. There's some really great synth work on here. A song like If Only We Could Sleep, that's one where the intro, while appropriately creepy, just goes on for like way too friggin' long. It didn't need to be like that. Could have been cut in half and been a much better song. Why Can't I Be You is perfect though. It's the band's best horny song. The violin sound on How Beautiful You Are, real cool. One of their best and most effective ballads. Like you said, The Snake Pit, one of their worst songs, just really long and uninteresting. That Middle Eastern cliche does not work. But then you get a song like Hey You, which is that pop of saxophone, really brightens things up. Just Like Heaven, literally a perfect song. Incredibly important. It's got that urgency to it, super romantic, super lovely. Just like pure pop. There's no hints of darkness. There's no like impending doom here. It's just a perfect pop song. Love the guitar on All I Want, but you know, it's too long. Overdoes the 2 minute intro thing. Too many wasted moments. And the second half kind of pushes limits of my patience. But the highs on this are probably the highest on any Cure album. It's just the stretches of mundane, kind of wrote by the numbers Cure stuff. Doesn't quite work for me, but all in all, it's a strong, high 4 star album.
All right, for me, number two is Wish. Staying at 4.5 stars for this one. Perry Bamonte on guitar joins the band. Seems to be thought of as not the classic period, maybe a little bit. Maybe that's because we've crossed the threshold into the 90s. But I think, make no mistake, this is peak Cure. Some of their most tuneful and beautifully melodic songs. Just great writing from Robert Smith. I think lyrically one of the stronger efforts. Even longer tracks like From the Edge of the Deep Green Sea are really engaging the whole way through them. You're not checking your watch or wondering how long some instrumental passage is going to go on for. Doesn't feel like 7 minutes 45 seconds at all. This record also has just like this little bit extra of that like live band feel. It feels like a rock band in a room together, maybe a bit more than some of the previous records, Disintegration. It feels a little less produced, even though it's quite produced. I read that they were like using tons and tons of tracks and experimenting a lot with feedback and things like that. But a lot of that is just in the background, and the bulk of what you are getting hit with as the listener is the core band. Friday I'm in Love, one of the greatest pop songs ever written, one of the catchiest songs. It's not the first Cure song I ever heard, but it was the first one that I really paid attention to. It was the first one that made me interested in the Cure. And then you follow that with just the melancholy of Trust. It's a real juxtaposition and a showcase of both sides of the Cure coin. Letter to Elise is great. Overall, the record's maybe a little bit long, little 90s syndrome going on there, but I like everything on it a good bit. I think it's just, yeah, just melodically one of their strongest efforts.
My number two is going to be Disintegration, which I had a love-hate relationship with Disintegration for a while. And it grew on me enough to get to number two because I kind of put off my hang-ups about it. I love Plain Song. Plain Song is great. The way it comes in, it's got okay. It's got that 3 minute intro that probably isn't necessarily needed, but I think it works to start off an album. The drums are just absolutely massive, big bass. You can kind of tell, okay, this is The Cure 211, kind of amped up, almost arena rock sounding, with just the way it's produced and how everything's going on. And it's great. And then you get to Pictures of You, which is probably my least favorite Cure song. I hate it. I do not like it at all. It is so long. It's 7 minutes. Nothing happens. This is like the top of my should have been a poem chart because the lyrics are fine, lovely even. But another like 3 minute intro, some of the most boring guitar playing imaginable, just repetitive to death. There's all those like sparkly wind chimes going off, which I just hate. It sounds kind of cheesy, but actually not, but I also don't like Close Down that much either because it's kind of the same thing. It's another overly long intro, kind of amelodic guitar noodling. Those two songs kind of kill the mood for me, and it's taken me a lot to get over like that stumbling block right at the beginning of the album. Love Song's great. Kind of been ruined for me by 311 and Adele and just hearing it a bajillion times. I don't quite hold it, at the same level as Friday I'm in Love or Just Like Heaven. It's a good song, and it's kind of got that Cure cliche of like the sweet and the sour, the light and the darkness. Like it's a love song, but it's also kind of gothic and moody and dour, kind of Cure cliche. But then I think the album really takes off. I included Last Dance in my notes. So I'll just continue including it, even though it wasn't on the original, apparently. But I think it's really cool. It got some Police, Andy Summers like guitar to it. Lullaby is awesome. Just so good. All of the whispery background vocals, the synth line reminds me a little bit of Cloud Busting by Kate Bush. The lyrics, the Spider-Man is having me for dinner tonight. It's just creepy. It's got that great vibe, an absolutely disgusting bass line. For a song about like, getting eaten by the Spider-Man, it absolutely slaps. That groove is amazing. Fascination Street's a banger. Another like brutally heavy bass riff. There's high-pitched synths bouncing off each other is great. A jangly guitar. Smith's vocals, which I feel like in the first couple songs they're a little like, I don't know, adult contemporary Robert Smith. Now he's back, the urgency, that Robert Smith that you know and love. Love Disintegration, the title track. Those weird kind of like doll-like backing vocals are a great touch. And to me, I mean, there's some great songs on here. I don't think there's any bad tracks other than Pictures of You and maybe Close Down. But I don't like the way it's sequenced, and I think that, having those three tracks with those 3-minute intros that sort of just repeat and repeat and repeat. There should be a 4.5 star album for me, but I'm keeping it at 4 stars, mostly just because I think it can be a little better sequenced and a little more. I don't know. Those first three and then everything else feel almost like two different albums to me, two different eras. So I don't know. Probably nitpicking it because everyone loves it, but so it's only high 4 stars for me.
Well, I'm moving up for my number one to 5 stars for the Head on the Door. Yeah, just opens with the masterpiece Pop Confection in Between Days, one of the best songs of the 80s, the furthest into pop music that they had ventured to that point in their career. This, I guess, sort of considered like the start of their pop forward era for the band. But even though it is sort of thought of in that way, it is not all as energized and infectious as that song. The very next song, Kyoto Song, is quite dark and mysterious with Eastern influenced hook on it. The Blood has flamenco style acoustic guitars. Robert Smith's vocals getting more and more animated. And adapting to accommodate the shifting environments of these more varied songs. Push is incredible. That is one, though, that Joe might not like because it employs Robert Smith's patented delayed gratification song structure with the long intro. Close to Me, pure pop, but also utterly unique. Like, it's not like they were trying to emulate all the other pop bands of the time. There is not another song I can think of that sounds like that one. A Night Like This is Smith's, heartsick romanticism at its peak. Screw is almost Bowie-esque, just that cold plastic funk kind of sound. To me, basically a perfect album, probably in my top 5 or 10 of the 80s. Just one of the best of that decade for me. I like everything on it a lot. So, yeah, best they ever did for me.
Yeah, it's my number one too. 4.5 stars for me. I'm not gonna go totally crazy and go to 5 stars. But one of the best in 1985. I think the key here, maybe, well, not the key. One of the keys, though, Boris Williams, drummer for the Thompson Twins previously, becomes a drummer. And I don't know, it just seems like it expands their sound. It takes a little bit of the Tops variety and pop-iness and rockiness and just it's better. It's Robert Smith taking that and just whittling away, getting it to the point where he's a pop writing machine with a song like In Between Days and Close to Me. And even A Night Like This, which, not really a pop song, but it has such a strong melody and it's just such a well-written song that I don't think he could have written something like that before, whatever he did in 1984, working with Susie and the Banshees and The Glove. Like all the things he learned and then focused and, implemented on this one. It's just the songwriting is better. It's more polished. It's not all pop though. Kyoto Song, slow and plodding. The Blood has some cool jangly guitar to it, that flamenco playing in spirit. Push, like Jason said, has that extended intro, but I think it works on this album because he's not doing it every single song. Close to Me, like I said, it's a perfect pop song. That little synth marimba part or whatever, that cheeky little bass line. It's cutesy and weird and precious, and maybe it invents the idea of cutesy alternative pop, perhaps. Screw is a cool sound, sinking, moody synth-driven ballad. It's got all of the different sides of The Cure and Robert Smith, and it puts it into a pretty concise little pop album. Sounds great. It doesn't sound like 1985, which is a big plus for it. And yeah, it just sounds great. It's well written, well performed. Just the top. It's the highlight of the Cure catalog for me.
We agree again. I feel like we agree ever since Cram left. We always come together on these listographies.
Channel's just falling apart. It's too much agreement going on here. Too many good
It
vibes.
it's a kind of a weird Cure or weird because I would say that I love the Cure, but my reviews of the records are fairly lukewarm up until the top three or four. But also, I wouldn't say that they're a singles band or like yeah. I think there's interesting songs all throughout their catalog. A lot of them are singles, but they've got good deep cuts and non-album tracks, and yeah, it's kind of weird how I'm of their era. I'm an era of which I'm not a huge fan of in general. I think they are head and shoulders above almost everyone else.
I think people don't think I like The Cure, but I like The Cure a lot. They kind of were a singles band for me just because, my friends had, I think, either Galore or the greatest hits. So I heard all the singles and I thought they were great. And, some of their non-singles a little harder to get into, but uh, I don't think they have very many bad songs, really. Even, some of the stuff on 17 Seconds and, Faith and Pornography that I don't love. I think they're all pretty well written and interesting. I just don't love all of their albums because I don't think they really got into what I like until, the top. And then they had a pretty good stretch of really good albums, but I wouldn't say they're one of my favorite like album bands, but I think I like them more than my album reviews would indicate.
All right, well, let us know what you think of The Cure, how you rank them, what you think of our rankings. Hit the like button, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, check the video description for our Patreon if you'd like to join us over there. We got lots of games and stuff going on the Discord and other stuff going on with our patrons. So check it out. Thanks for watching. We will see you in the next one.